It's been a while. We had some roadblocks on making and editing videos, and that's why we haven't had any in a while. But we got some things figured out, and the plan is to now continue making videos. So today I'm going to be continuing the story about my triplet pregnancy, talking about when I was on bed rest, the birth of the triplets, and also their NICU stay. And also my boys are climbing into each other's cribs and they're just having a ball in there. So you might be able to hear them in the background. So a triplet pregnancy is inherently high risk because a body is not made to sustain triplets. It's not meant to carry triplets. You can't really get big enough for triplets, so they're always preterm. I think it's something like 98% of triplets are born preterm. Preterm labor is wildly common among women pregnant with triplets. As I said in the last video about the pregnancy, we were so closely monitored. We had ultrasounds every 2 weeks at least, and it was just so reassuring to be able to see the babies and check on them and know that they were okay. I always knew that the doctors had a handle on the situation and that if anything went wrong, we could figure it out. Then at my 30-week appointment with my OB, he decided to go ahead and give me steroid shots. It helps the lungs of the fetus develop more quickly. So you give one shot and then I think it's 24 hours later you give another shot. And my OB decided to do it just as a precaution. 30 weeks with triplets is really, really good. He at the beginning of my pregnancy, he said 30 weeks would be the goal, and I don't think he really expected me to go for very much longer. So he gave me the steroid shot, and then that night, I started to feel contractions. Not painful at all, and not very frequent, but the rule that I had always been taught was if I felt more than 5 in an hour, that I should go to the hospital to labor and delivery and get checked out. And I definitely was feeling more than 5 an hour. It was more like 6, 7, 8. But I really didn't want to go to the hospital, and so I was in denial until like 3 a.m. So something that would happen is I wouldn't be able to sleep, and then I would get restless leg, and it would feel like my legs couldn't stop moving, and it's an infuriating feeling when you're trying to fall asleep. I would get up and walk around for like 10 minutes and then lay back down. And throughout this whole time, this was from about 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. This whole thing, I was trying to fall asleep but couldn't, and I was having contractions, but in complete denial that I did not want to go to the hospital and that nothing was wrong. It was around 3 a.m. that I finally decided that I really should go to the hospital. I'd been having, like I said, like 7 or 8 contractions in an hour, and I was so certain that they were just gonna send me home that I drove myself to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, they sent me straight up to labor and delivery. They checked me in, and the doctor checked my cervix, dilated to a 4, and completely effaced. So they put me on the monitors, a contraction monitor, and the monitors for a triplet belly are just like insane. You've got to have one for each baby plus a contraction monitor, and it was just, it was awful. And they also hooked me up to a magnesium IV, which in the past they used to use magnesium to stop preterm labor, but they don't do that anymore. It's called a neural prophylactic, and basically what it does is it just helps the baby, if the baby is born, it helps guard against brain bleeds, which are common among preterm babies. So they hooked me up to the magnesium, and it did end up stopping my contractions, which was a good thing, but they made me do an entire 24 hours on magnesium, which was the worst 24 hours of the entire pregnancy, like by far, for sure. I was miserable. I didn't sleep at all. So I hadn't slept all that day up until 3 a.m. and then I didn't sleep for the next 24 hours until about 7 a.m. the next day. So it was 48 hours without sleep, which is insane. And I was super uncomfortable because I had to be on my back for the monitors, and I couldn't move around too much. If I moved around too much, then the baby's heartbeats would fall off the monitors, and then the nurses would come back in and put them on, and it was just like so stressful, and I was so uncomfortable, and I was so tired, and I couldn't sleep. The magnesium lowered my blood pressure, and I already have really low blood pressure anyway, and then also my heart was trying to pump all this blood for all these babies and the placentas, and I almost passed out several times, and I felt super nauseous just because I had low blood pressure. So It was really awful. Well, after the 24 hours of magnesium, the doctor came in to talk to me and they decided to keep me there basically because I was dilated, and I think they didn't expect me to stay pregnant for very much longer. My body was really stretched to its max. And they said, we're gonna keep you here until the babies are born. And so then I just stayed in the hospital for the next 2 weeks. And honestly, I loved it. I loved not having to worry about my meals. I loved just picking up the phone and ordering whatever I wanted. I loved having people bring me water. And even though I definitely missed Annika and Andrew a lot, I really loved being at the hospital. Oh, my boys, they're crazy. I watched a lot of Netflix. I embroidered some onesies. I did some coloring, and I honestly I loved it. And I think the biggest relief was having someone actually tell me that I needed to stay in bed. Because before that, I had spent a lot of time in bed anyway. I was super tired all the time, and just like, even sitting in church had been a challenge for me. So it was really nice to be given that permission to just lay in bed all the time. So, and then about 2 weeks, around 32 weeks, the doctor came and said, nothing's happening. And I lived close enough to the hospital. We were only 10 minutes away from the hospital. They said, you're fine to go home. Just come back immediately as soon as you start feeling contractions again. So they discharged me. I went home at 32 weeks. And that's when I also started my non-stress test twice a week. When the doctor sent me home, they said you need to be on complete bed rest. Don't get out of bed except to go to the bathroom and to shower. So basically what I was doing at the hospital, they said, you can go home as long as you do that. So that's what I did at home, except that I then also had to get in the car to go to the hospital for my non-stress tests, and also to my OB for doctor's appointments. But I never started labor again. I never had any more contractions after that. And then at 34 weeks, I was at a non-stress test, and one of the babies, I think it was baby B, which is Jen's, he was having some very small, they call them decels, and it's where his heart rate was kind of dropping and then coming back up, and then dropping and then coming back up, and that's called a decel. And it's a sign of distress in the fetus. We talked with my MFM, and the conclusion that she came to was today would be a great day to deliver. She had decided that 35 weeks would be the maximum that she would let me stay pregnant, and I was already 34 weeks, so it had only been another week at most. So my MFM called my OB. At the hospital that I was at, the MFMs, they don't deliver babies. So she called my OB, and my OB said, yes, we can schedule your C-section for tonight at 6 p.m. The minute that epidural kicked in, it was like pure bliss. I didn't feel hungry anymore. I didn't feel achy. I could lay on my back, and I loved it. It was the best part of my pregnancy. C-section was really standard. Interestingly, the babies are all born in the same minute, which is 7:19. It's okay.
Hey, Mommy.
There's Mom.
I get a picture. Let's picture, Mom.
Oh, thank you.
Mom, take a while.
What?
Take a nap.
You did not take a nap.
Mom, go nap day. Go nap.
Do you want to take a nap still? No.
Mom, go.
So the only thing that I need to talk about, I think. Okay. So I think I was in the middle of talking about my C-section. As I was saying, they were all born in the same minute, and then unfortunately I was not able to see them immediately after they were born. They were taken into a little side room where they had NICU doctors and nurses and respiratory specialists waiting for them. Each baby had their own team, and they were immediately assessed for any needs that they may have. triplets were immediately taken to the level 1 NICU where they had CPAP and nutritional IVs and bed warmings. And as far as I know, those were the only interventions at that time. I was wheeled into the NICU just on my bed as soon as I left surgery. And it's an interesting memory that I have. I remember being in the NICU, but I don't remember seeing the babies. And I'm not really sure why. I wouldn't say that I have any particular type of trauma or bad memories associated with that time. And I only had an epidural, so I wasn't woozy from general anesthesia. So I'm not really sure why I don't remember seeing the babies. I remember being in the NICU, but I don't remember seeing the babies. It was about 6 hours later that I was able to get myself out of bed, finally. My C-section happened at 7 p.m., so I did sleep in those 6 hours before I went back up to the NICU to see the triplets. The triplets had a very low-key NICU stay. I know that the NICU time for a lot of parents is a really hard time. We were very, very lucky. They just didn't really have any problems. We never had any bradycardias or brachycardias. We never had any brain bleed scares or any infections, nothing. They really just needed a little bit of respiratory help, a little help maintaining their body temperature, and then help getting nutrition, and then learning how to eat from a bottle. And honestly, that was the majority of their time at the NICU, was learning how to eat from a bottle. At 28 days after birth, both Mads and Thea graduated from the NICU. They did have to come home on oxygen and respiratory monitors, but that was okay. We were just so happy to have them home. Jens ended up staying for 2 more days, but that was it. He came home at 30 days after he was born. He was also on oxygen. So at one point we had 3 babies on 3 tanks of oxygen, and it was a crazy mess getting all those cords and tubes all figured out. Well, that is the end of today's video. Thank you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Every little subscribe means a lot to us, and we appreciate the support and the love.